Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to part 2 of our virtual Taste of Nature series starring garlic mustard. So at this point you have already heard from Sarah all about the threat of invasive species, how we should remove them, and why they're a danger to our native forests. If you haven't heard all from Sarah yet, please go back, find that video, watch it first, then come back to me so I can give you a little extra incentive to maybe go out and pull some of this tasty invasive species. That's right, I said tasty. Today we're getting creative and we are cooking with garlic mustard. It's what I call like a perfect win-win, right? You go out, you pull garlic mustard, you save the biological integrity of our forests, and you get basically a free meal, right? But before we get to cooking, let's learn a little bit more about this garlic mustard plant. People have been eating this for a while. This is not a new thing. I'm not being all that innovative. In fact, the recipe I'm going to be showing today is, I guess, hailed by serious foragers as a bit of a cliche. But I'm going with it. It sounds pretty tasty. This plant made it over to the United States from Europe and Asia in the 1800s as a medicinal herb and to use in eating. So this is why it came here in the first place. Garlic mustard is what we call a biennial plant. That means it completes its life cycle over 2 years. In its first year of life, in the summer and fall, it'll start to pop up and grow its leaves and its roots, stems, all that good stuff. But then when it gets too cold in winter, it goes to sleep and enters a period of dormancy for the entire winter. It's not until things warm up in the spring, in the following year, that the stems and leaves pop back up, the plant goes to seed, and it completes its life cycle. This is why it's so important that we are harvesting and dealing with garlic mustard now in early spring before it goes to seed and has the chance to spread. So, set the scene. It's early spring. It's time to move, act, remove the garlic mustard before it goes to seed. But how do we know what plants to pull? Come a little closer, I'll show you. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this garlic mustard. Fortunately for you and me, right now it's pretty easy to identify this plant. It can't really be confused with too much else growing out there in the forest right now. And double win, it can't be confused with anything considered poisonous either. I will say, please be sure and positive you know you're pulling garlic mustard before you start eating it. That's the first rule of foraging. But I'm going to give you some tips to make sure that you can forage this safely. All right, so one of the things you're looking for is, we call this alternating leaves. So the leaves themselves, this is the entire leaf here, alternates on the stem. They're not directly next to each other. Do you see how one's a little bit lower? Here's the next one. Here's the next one up here. That's considered an alternating leaf pattern. The leaves themselves are considered like heart or kidney shaped. You can kind of see that. And the edge is scalloped. Let me see if I can find a good example of a scalloped edge. What do you think? Yeah, you can see that. So we've got scalloped kidneys here. In the first year, kind of the way they're set up now, the plants are growing in these rosettes. You see how they're all kind of coming from a center point here. They're growing in these rosettes close to the ground. So you'll see these bunches that you want to look out for as well. If all of that still you're not quite sure if you're working with garlic mustard, take a leaf, rub it between your fingers, and give it a sniff. If it smells like garlic, you're working with garlic mustard. Right, so here now we have a colander of freshly washed garlic mustard leaves. That garlicky scent that I just shared with you as an identification tool for you, that's the reason that this plant is so well adapted for the recipe we're trying today. That garlicky, kind of spicy, a little bit bitter flavor is perfect for pesto. So I'm assuming most of you have had pesto. It's an Italian condiment. Typically, it's basil-based. So the only thing we're really switching out of this recipe is, instead of basil, we're using garlic mustard. The rest of the ingredients here are pretty traditional to a normal basil-based pesto. So like I said, instead of basil, the leafy green that we've got carrying the condiment here is garlic mustard. The recipe that I'm citing, or that I'm kind of using here as a guide, called for 3 cups of loosely packed garlic mustard leaves. I just grabbed a bunch. I think this exceeds 3 cups, but when I make my basil pesto, I like a little bit more herbs. So I did a little bit more than maybe the recipe called for, which is fine. I still have an entire trash bag of of garlic mustard still outside. So if I mess up, I still have a lot to work with if I wanted to. I also have these nuts. The nuts are another big component of a traditional pesto recipe. I'm using a combination of walnuts and pine nuts. Pine nuts, these little like rice-shaped guys, they're the most traditional in a pesto, but they're also really expensive. So the best alternative that I've found is walnuts. So I kind of want to be fancy. I'm going half and half. Not like so fancy, not all pine nuts, but you know, they're in there. And this is a full cup of nuts. Then I have garlic. I have a lot of garlic because I love garlic. The recipe that I'm using again said 2 cloves. I got something like 5 cloves here. You adjust the garlic to whatever your sense of taste or delicacy is. I prefer a lot of garlic. And finally, we have this cup of Parmesan cheese. It is grated, pretty standard stuff. So one of the things I like about pesto, from my experience making basil-based pesto, is that it's just basically these 4 or 5 ingredients: the leafy green, your cheese, your garlic, your nuts, and olive oil, just in different proportions. So go outside, pick a bunch of garlic mustard, and start fussing around. Do you not need as much nuts? Do you not need as much garlic? Do you want more cheese? Do you want more oil? It really is a flexible recipe that you can adapt. So I've gone through the proportions that I've used, but certainly it's totally up to you. And what's great, I'm going to show you next how to put it all together. The best part about this recipe, it is super duper easy. No heat required. Let's get to it. All right, so now we're putting it all together. Like I just said, super duper easy recipe. Another reason why I love it. All you need now is a food processor. We're going to put basically everything in here, grind it together, and it's going to taste delicious. I've seen some recipes just throw everything in at once and start blending. I'm going to try to do it in steps to make sure I didn't chop any of these nuts first. You can see they're whole. So I'm going to put them in first with the garlic and get these really finely chopped up and blend together before throwing in the leaves. Alrighty, so throwing them nuts, throwing all this garlic. I haven't calibrated for how garlicky these leaves are going to be, so I'm not too concerned. I love garlic. I think it's going to taste really good. All right, and it's going to get loud, I think, so bear with me as I blend these. Let's take a look at this. Yeah. It smells so good already. So something I didn't mention, I did lightly toast the nuts beforehand. Totally optional step. I often don't do it because about 90% of the time I walk away and burn the nuts. And it's just not worth the risk. But I took the risk for you guys today. And I think it was worth it. They smell really roasty and nutty and it's delicious. Okay. So with that, I'm going to start adding garlic mustard leaves. I'm going to add them in little handfuls and process because I have a lot of them. I don't want to overwhelm my poor little machine. So I guess bear with me as we go through this. Ooh, it's looking good. Oh, I can smell it from here. Shoot. Can you guys smell it from there? I hate it when chefs do that. Do you ever watch YouTube videos of cooking and they're like, oh, if only we were here to smell it, and you hate those people for doing it? I'm falling into that trap. It does smell really good. I see why they do it now. How are we doing? Oh, yeah. Okay. I keep adding leaves. I got them. Might as well use them. Alright, so we've kind of reached the capacity of my little food processor, I think. There's a couple big leaves that need to still be chopped up, but it's pretty thick in there, so it's having a hard time. We're troubleshooting this together, you know. Alright. Alright, so we're in real good shape. I feel like I should show this to you so you know what it looks like. Is there a way to work that out? Here. Check that out. So you see everything's really well combined. It's kind of mushy. There's no big leaf particles. It just looks like a really thick green paste. That's what you want. Alright, back onto the food processor. So this next part, I'm going a little bit off book. Every recipe for pesto that I've ever found, basil or garlic mustard, has said that at this point you're supposed to add the olive oil in a steady stream as the food processor is going. My lid lacks the capability for this. So what I'm going to do is just add in increments, blend, take off, blend, take off. The other thing is, this is one of those moments where you can really adapt the recipe to your taste. So I've seen people add anywhere from a quarter cup to a full cup of oil. There's a big margin there. So I'm going to start by adding a quarter cup at a time and stop whenever I feel like it's got the consistency I want. And I guess I recommend you do the same until you figure out what works for you. And again, if you have a food processor that allows you to blend and pour simultaneously, that is, in theory, what you should be doing at this point. So. And if you don't know how much oil you want to add, like if you don't know what your taste is, do keep in mind that after this step, we still have to add the cheese, which is going to thicken it a little bit more. So if it were me, I'd err on the side of adding, getting it a little bit more loose than you think you might want, because you're going to be adding another binder momentarily. All right. Doop, doop, doop. So if anyone's keeping track, I'm at 3/4 of a cup of oil. So I guess I'm an oily type of pesto. Or maybe I just have that many leaves. That looks good to me. I think 3/4 of a cup is my sweet spot. Okay. Can we get another close-up shot of what this looks like now with oil? Okay. It looks pretty similar, but it's more jelly now. Thank you. Excellent work. Okay. The last step is yanking this guy out. I wash my hands, I promise. Especially, I'm gonna wash my hands a lot these days. Okay. With that out, we are adding our cheese. And we are stirring it. Shoot, man, this actually looks better than my basil pesto, if I'm being completely honest. It's got a really pretty bright green color. for a garlic nut like me, it's just like the garlic smell is insane. And maybe you can see it is kind of like a pasty texture. So with pesto, it's like, in my mind, a universal condiment. You could just spread it on bread or on toast with eggs, delicious. Probably the most traditional application, pasta. A consistency like this will still heat up well and meld with pasta. I've even seen it put on like fried polenta cakes. Put it anywhere, it's delicious, eat it up. So I think we're good to go here. Could I have a spoon? All right, okay, let's give it a taste. Yeah, ooh, yeah. It definitely doesn't taste like basil pesto. The spicy bitterness of the garlic mustard comes through in the way of basil doesn't. But that garlic, and it's still so herby, this is really cool. The only thing it's missing is some salt and pepper. So this is one of those, every recipe says salt and pepper to taste. We're doing that. So I don't have a strict measurement for you here. I just tasted it without any kind of salt and pepper. I'm a salty person, we're a salty family, so we might add more salt than you might want to, but again, the beauty of this recipe, I've said it over and over, is just do what tastes good for you, right? And it's gonna work out. Ah, now the pepper's in there, shoot. One last taste to make sure we're golden here. Yeah, that's money. Oh gosh, Guy Fieri says that. No, I'm not Guy Fieri. I'm Guy Fieri if he foraged. So, oh yeah. I really do recommend this recipe, not just because it helps our forests get rid of a pretty aggressive invasive species, but this might have come out better than some of, again, my basil pesto recipes. So, I guess Burke's Nature's Facebook page will have this recipe available for you if you didn't catch all the details. Get out there, pull some invasive species, and make a delicious meal. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.